grappled with pollution and waste, another crisis was brewing.
I have dreamt of seeing the great herds of wild animals, jungles and rainforests, full of birds and butterflies. But now I wonder if they will even exist for my children to see.
Poaching and habitat loss were pushing some of the world's most iconic animals to the brink of extinction. Driven by science, UNEP supported a series of international treaties, limiting and in some cases banning the trade of endangered species, safeguarding migratory animals, expanding protected areas, and increasing financing for biodiversity protection. The seminal Earth Summit in Brazil introduced the idea of sustainable development.
This is an historical moment for the mobilization of all peoples of the world.
Over the last 5 decades, UNEP has helped more than 100 countries enshrine the right to a healthy environment in their constitutions and produced scientific studies to guide member states in their decision-making. In 2012, a new international body was established to provide scientific data on biodiversity in a joint effort from UNEP and other UN organizations. In 2019, it found that 1 million species face the threat of extinction, underscoring the urgency to act.
Every action we take alters the earth that future generations will inherit.
The world is starting to recognize the effects of planetary warming, but UNEP began sounding the alarm 3 decades ago. As early as 1988, UNEP and the World Meteorological Organization launched the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. For over 30 years, IPCC science has helped member states counter climate change, earning the body a Nobel Prize for its work. UNEP-backed studies have informed some of the planet's most crucial climate accords. These include a 1992 agreement that set a template for curbing greenhouse gas emissions, followed by the Kyoto Protocol and the landmark 2015 Paris Agreement.
I'm proud to announce that 175 parties have signed the Paris Agreement.
UNEP has also mobilized 450 banks, insurers and investors to help create a more sustainable world.
We don't want fossil fuels anymore.
A lot has happened in the last 50 years, but it's the next 10 that will be pivotal for life on this planet.
But in
Okay, an amazing evening to each and everyone joining on this call. We are glad to have you join to this session of the Teach4SDGs program. And I want to welcome you all on behalf of the leadership of AIIDEV Africa. And this evening, we are moving right away to today's session as we already have our guest and facilitator on the call this evening. And to those who are joining on YouTube, thank you for joining, and we are so glad to have you. Please, to all educators, endeavor to put your display name in the right order. Your display name should start from your country name. To start with your country name, and that followed by your first name and also your last name. Please, we appreciate you do that. And mostly those of us that are from Nigeria, just put Nigeria in the front of your name. And those from all other countries would like to take a track of where each and everyone are joining and connecting from. And once again, this evening, we are so glad and we are so happy to have the third session of the Teach4SDG program, and which is still going to last for the next 2 to 3 weeks here. And we are going to take questions. I can see the presents and up at this point, but we are still going to take questions and answer at the end of the session. And without taking much of our time, we are starting the very first session this evening. And I would have loved to take feedbacks. I would have loved to take feedbacks from the last class. Can we just take 2 feedbacks and we move on to the session for today. Please, maybe you'd like to share a feedback, you'd like to share a comment about the training so far, how it's been so far, what are the things that have changed, what are the things you've learned, what are the new things you are looking forward to learn on this program. I would like to take just two, one male, one female from different countries. Please, if you'd like to say something, you can just raise your hand, but it's important your display name is in the right order for me to be able to identify such person. Okay, I would like to take one or two people. I can see Linda from Nigeria. Please unmute your mic. If your name is not in the right display format, please do that. Linda, you can unmute your mic just in a minute. We'd like to take feedback from you. What has been the new things which you've learned from this program and what are the developments like?
Okay. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
In this last one that we had with Dr. Gamma, it was so good. At first, it was quite confusing. I didn't know what to do at first, but I had to go through the lecture again. I had to, even the assignment, I had to go through it. At the end of the day, I found out that there is a way you can actually incorporate those SDGs. It's not a must that you can pick all of them, but some of those SDGs must appear in what you are doing. Like I was able to incorporate Goal 4, which is education, 13, which is climate change, into teaching of verbs in English language. The moment I did that, it was like I'm learning something entirely different from what I already know. It was so, I was so excited. I was happy that I was able to do it. It was okay. I've been learning so much through this platform. Thank you.
Okay, and you can also use the comment section to drop your feedbacks. I'd like to know, share your comments about how impactful the training and what are the things you've learned and what are the things you are looking forward to learn. And thank you, Anita. I can see you on the call, and other program managers are there. For those who are on YouTube, you can use the comment section to share your feedbacks and comments as well. All right, I would like to take the other two people did not rename their display name properly. So I won't call your name, please. It's important you have your display name in the right format. Okay, I can see someone now. I'll take another person. Ahmed, you can unmute your mic, please. Ahmed from Nigeria, can you unmute your mic? Can you hear me? Okay, we won't like to take too much time on feedbacks. We always do that maybe in some other course of the program. You can also use the comment section to share your feedbacks and like to know how impactful this training has been so far. Like I mentioned, we already have our speaker on the call this evening in person of Dr. Somi, and we are so blessed to have him. And while we wait to hear his profile, and I'll just hand it over to Catherine to run the program after he's coming on board to run the session, and for the next 1 hour, after which we are going to have questions and answers. All right, thank you.
Ambassador Dr. Somi, a visionary leader with a passion for sustainability and a voice for climate action. With a background in construction and environmental management, he has dedicated his life to bridging the gap between industry and the environment. He holds numerous degrees and certifications in sustainability, including a doctorate degree in sustainable growth from Commonwealth University College, honoris causa, ISO 14001:2015 Environmental Management Systems, and ISO 45001:2018 Occupational Health and Safety Management Systems. Ambassador Dr. Somi, a visionary leader with passion for sustainability and a voice for climate action. With a background in construction and environmental management, he has dedicated his life to bridging the gap between industry and the environment. He holds numerous degrees and certifications in sustainability, including a doctorate degree in sustainable growth from Commonwealth University College, honoris causa, ISO 14001:2015 environmental management systems, and ISO 45001:2018, occupational health and safety management systems. As the chairman of the Sustainable Green Environment Initiative and the president of the African Network of Green Ambassadors, Somi is at the forefront of the fight against climate change. He has published
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. And I would like to hand over to Dr. Somi, as he's going to be leading us in this wonderful and insightful core focus of learning, which you are going to get to learn more about climate, biodiversity, and all of that things that relates to forest and biodiversity. Thank you. Good evening. Please, it's very important we take notes. Let's ensure we note every point and also get to prepare our questions and engage each other in this insightful learning. Over to you, Dr. Somi. Thank you for joining us. We sincerely appreciate your time. Hello, Dr. Somi.
Okay. Sorry, I was trying to, I was having some technical challenges. Can you hear me now, please?
Yes, we can hear you now. Good evening, Doctor. So good to see you.
Good evening. Good evening to Mr. Emmanuel. Good evening to everybody on the call. And thank you very much for having me today. So we'll jump right into the business of the day. Hello, everyone. It's an exciting time with everyone today. And it's amazing to have about 270 people or participants on the call. This is actually a great one. Somi is my name, as I've been introduced, and I will be walking us through a key topic on climate change, forest, and biodiversity conservation. I know we probably must have gone through quite a number of course, series of lecturing and different knowledge sharing, insightful presentations. And because of this, I probably might be coming from just a little bit different perspective to the usual, let's just learn, right? So when we are talking about let's just learn, then we'll be talking about let's also act, and let us learn how to be able to do it so that peradventure be able to learn, at the same time be able to put what we have learned into action in our respective area of businesses and daily activities. Is my screen up, please? Can somebody confirm this?
Yes, your screen is up, Doctor.
Oh, great. All right. Thank you. So we jump right into the conversation about climate change. I know several talks must have been on climate change, and it's no different for me to come and also mention to you that climate change has significant impact on both the forest and biodiversity, right? When we're talking about climate change, we're talking about the climate in which we live in. Of course, we talk about sometimes we have rainy season, sometimes we have dry season, right? Here in Nigeria, in some other parts of the world, sometimes you have summer, you have fall, different things that happens within our environment. Actually, in itself, the weather condition and the likes constitutes climate change. And when you're talking about the forest, you're talking about the living things in the forest in terms of, okay, I just use the word forest again. The living things that peradventure have leaves, trees, shrubs, and the likes that are grown out there that gives us enormous carbon dioxide that we as individuals, human beings, breathe in. And when we're talking about biodiversity, then we're talking about the different diversification that we have, not just about the forest only, but we also have some other species that also undertake the planet Earth in which we live, right? So we have the animals, we have those in the waters, we have those on land, and we have those that are flying in the sky. So we have different forms of animals at the same time. We also have the higher species, which are also human beings that also thrive and live within the same climate. So when you're trying to bring all of this into a one contextual discussion, then you'll probably be having climate change, that is different changes in weather and the weather condition that you have, and you're having the trees resonating with also the living things as per the animals and human beings, right? So it is a very vital conversation because this is actually what makes us human. And that is what makes the animals animals. That's what makes even the forest, right? And for us to be able to live consistently, this is a conversation we must have because we have gotten to that time and age where we are the brink of falling apart in terms of holding fast the climate that we used to have. So now the change in temperature in itself is what brought about the climate change advocacy, the climate change talk that we have been currently having around the entire world. Then we'll talk about the precipitation, talk about extreme weather condition associated with climate change, of course, that can affect both the forest and also affect human beings and also affect the health and the productivity of the forest and the biodiversities that lives within the space of the Mother Earth, right? So now we have the distribution and abundance of many plants and animal species. And all of this needs to be guided and, of course, taken care of so that just not that we will be able to see the number of different form of animals that had gone into extinctions. Now, some of us were not even privileged to be able to see some of the different species of dinosaurs that lived back then in the Arctics. But now, of course, it has been a conversation that we must have so that the next generation yet unborn will be able to see some of the species that we still have today that we can see so that we don't let everything go into extinction, right? This change in the weather, in the temperature, can actually, in turn, affect the ecological services provided by the forest, such as the carbon storage, water regulation. We have habitat for wildlife, and of course, biodiversity also, which include the variety of species, just like I mentioned earlier. The ecosystem and genetic diversity is also strongly linked with the forest. I think I've been able to link up everything together. And of course, forests are home to a large portion of the world's planet and animal species. So that simply means that if you want to protect the animals, if you want to protect human beings, then of course you have to also think about protecting the forest in itself, because the forests also serve as homes to several of the species that you intend to protect. And change in forests can have cascading effects on the biodiversity in which we discuss. In addition, biodiversity is critical for the resilience of forests to climate change, as it enables adaptation and ecosystem functioning. So for us to be able to have a rounded Mother Earth that is functioning for us, I'm going to give us some practical example for us to be able to have an understanding on how this situation is actually very critical, right? So for us to be able to have an ecosystem that is functioning, then it is important that we take both the forest and biodiversity very seriously. Now, I'm going to what's the fuss about? So now this simply means that, why are we talking about this? Why is everybody particular about this, right? There had been quite a number of conversations about climate change. Why is everybody shouting climate change? In fact, I still go to school normal. I still attend my lectures normal. I still do my normal daily activities. I still eat my normal food. Well, I have really not seen much of changes, right? But then people are shouting, there is climate change, there is climate change. So now what's the fuss about? So I want to give us a typical practical understanding on what it is about the shouts. Now, just imagine as you are seated within your respective areas now, right? Imagine that Earth is in a bathtub, and for a million of years, that bathtub has had an healthy level of carbon dioxide in it. I have two pictorial views right before us. I hope we can see it. And please, if you are the one trying to draw some lines on the screen, please kindly desist. It's causing some distractions, right? These two pictorial views that we have right before us, the first one, which is on my left, you'll see the Earth in a pictorial view, right, in the bathtub. If you look at the blue color that we have in there that represents water, you would notice that it is in a considerable level. That means the Earth is in a level in a bathtub that is healthy. So it's floating, it can breathe in, out, and it can as well swim, right? So it's more like, oh, okay, it's balanced, everything is fine. But then that level sometimes has risen and decreased over a period of times back in the ages, but it has stayed approximately the same. So as it is growing up, as it's coming down, it has quite a bit stayed within the same range. So you really wouldn't bother because Mother Earth is still safe. But when the Industrial Revolution now begins to happen, when humans now start burning fossil fuel, right? Now start burning coal, burning PMS, burning diesel, burning kerosene, different type of fossil fuel in which we have, you now discover that an industrial revolution, what it means is that you now begin to have industries, right? Because manufacturing begins to happen. You have to manufacture this and manufacture that. For that to happen, you need energy. And that means it's a good thing in itself, but at the same time, this is also counterproductive in terms of climate change because it now begins to accumulate a lot of carbon dioxide in the entire space that we have. Now, if you look at the second picture, which is showing another bathtub, right? You see a faucet that is opened up. Now there is so much water dripping out from that faucet. So that's exactly what happened during the time of Industrial Revolution. So when we begin to have different types of factories open up, different type of energy consumption that especially, of course, relies solely on fossil fuel, we actually turn on the faucet. And now there is so much carbon dioxide in the bathtub, and we can see exactly what is happening to Mother Earth. Now, this is what exactly the situation is at the moment. Sorry for that. Now, Earth is drowning in an overflowing tub of carbon dioxide. So now the second, or the third and the fourth picture that I have right in front of us now is talking about the Earth is drowning, and now there is need for us to now start putting forward actions to be able to say we want to salvage the situation. But most climate actions that we are now bringing forward in our days now, to this point, is for us to be able to reduce our footprint as of today. That's what it's doing. It's reducing our footprint as of today. And of course, it's turning down the faucet. So now if you look at okay, now we have two pictures, right? So that I won't confuse us. The second picture, if you look at that one, the faucet is turned off. What this is saying is that, oh, all right, let's even try as much as possible for us to be able to stop all the emissions. So now let's try to get to a level where we can say we are getting to a net zero, right? That's when we will say, whatever it is we put into the atmosphere, the same equivalent we're taking out of the atmosphere. Now we're at an equilibrium stage, and that's the net zero that we're talking about, right? Now, that means that when we get to net zero, we will completely turn off the faucet. But will that stop the situation? The earth is already drowning, right? And that simply means that even when we turn off the faucet, the top will still be overflowing. And that means Mother Earth is still going to be in serious danger. And that's what makes it very critical. And that's why we're talking about climate change in the manner with which we talk about it. So that means even the measures by which we put up today, number of things that you want to do, the climate action you want to put out there is not enough to be able to salvage the situation in which we are. And that is what led us to having the conversation about climate adaptation, climate mitigation, and climate restoration. If you have a pen, you probably might want to put that down. If you want to put forward any action within the climate change space, then you might be looking at it from this three category point of view: climate adaptation, mitigation, and restoration. The adaptation is finding means by which we can now adapt to the situation in which we find ourselves. Now, Earth is warming. Do you want to provide more of air conditioners for yourself to be able to salvage the situation to an extent? For how long are you going to do that? By the time it start getting to the point where the entire ice in the Arctic have melted and all the species that you have there are dead, and even the temperature has risen up to maybe 50% and it's already boiling water, will your air conditioner be able to suffice at that point in time? Now, these are some of the things you probably might be thinking about. So that means climate adaptation measures or putting forward action in that space is a good way, an approach to solving the climate challenge that we have, but it is not enough, right? So now that means as we are trying to put forward measures to be able to adapt to the situation in which we have found ourselves, it is important that at the same time, we are also finding a way to mitigate the effect. And that's where the net zero approach came into being. And that's when we're talking about the United Nations Eco Restoration Decade. So that means the year 2021 to year 2030 is dedicated to achieving a net zero, right? So when we get to that point where we will now start discussing that we need to put forward action to be able to mitigate the effect of climate change. That means whatever it is that several of our action is bringing into the space, we are finding the same measure to be able to take it completely out of the space so that we are at equilibrium. Climate mitigation. Now that's turning off the faucet. So now when we still turn off the faucet, don't forget, I mentioned earlier, that's still not going to solve the entire problem. So that means we still need a higher level approach to making sure that the climate change problem in which we have is sorted and solved. And that is what is going to actually drive us into having a conversation on climate restoration. That is what the second picture here is trying to depict. You will now see this second picture. You will see a hole in the bathtub where the carbon dioxide that is already in the bathtub can now get out. So now the ones we already have in the space is more than enough. It's already drowning Earth. So we also now need actions for us to be able to get out the carbon dioxide that we have that has already filled the space that is making Mother Earth drown, right? So now these are the three levels of different actions in which we can put forward. For you and for me, we can decide on which one is most important for us, and we can, at least at our whole local respective area, now begin to put forward action in this space. I've talked about the mitigation, I talked about the adaptation, and of course, talking about the restoration. So now here I just put forward, I said climate saturation is the goal of returning our climate to a safe and healthy state with atmospheric carbon dioxide level below 300 parts per million by the year 2050, because that is now the goal. So we need to now restore climate back to its original state. So as much as we're trying to adapt into the situation we have found ourselves, as much as we are also trying as much as possible to mitigate the effects that climate change is bringing onto the table for us, we are as well going to be thinking about how to restore back to the time while the camels roams the Arctic, right? I said it requires a safe and permanent removal of the trillion tons of carbon dioxide that has accumulated in the atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution. Human and ecosystem require a climate similar to the one in which we evolved and flourished. That's the one I'm talking about. The last time that we have a level of carbon dioxide exceed 400 parts per million was close to about 3 million years ago. And that's exactly the situation in which we are now. We are way over 400 parts per million. And that's why we have so much of a concern about the climate. And of course, that's why we need to put forward action to be able to salvage Mother Earth, because that's where we live. And of course, we want our next generation yet unborn to also live there. So now I want to give us an overview of what the carbon emission in itself looks like. Maybe I've been talking so much about the climate. Now let's talk about this carbon monoxide, the carbon that looks like the water in the bathtub that has filled the atmosphere. What does it look like? What's the outlook? So now we have an overview here, right? Now this emission that looks like the water in the bathtub actually constitutes both the carbon dioxide and the non-carbon dioxide. Non-carbon dioxide have methane and several other gases that are more dangerous and deadly, but some of them have a very shorter lifespan than the carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide can stay as high as long rather as thousands of years in the atmosphere without going away. And that's why it's a big deal. Because if you have something that will cause a carbon that will cause havoc and it's going to stay in the atmosphere for over 1,000 of years before it goes away, and we are turning in thousands, tons of billions of this carbon into the atmosphere on a yearly basis, then we have a problem which we need to deal with, right? Now, the combination of both the carbon dioxide and the non-carbon dioxide gas is what is referred to as the greenhouse gas emission. You probably must have heard that, right? And now that is the gas that is warming the Mother Earth, and that is the exact gas that we need to now start putting forward action to be able to remove from our space, right? An average of it is about 50 gigaton of carbon dioxide, right? When everything is converted to carbon dioxide, gigaton is about 10 raised to power 9 or thereabouts. So when you're talking about 10 raised to power 9, you're talking about 9 billion. So, and when you're talking about 9 billion times 50, that's actually enormous. You can't imagine the number of tonnage of carbon that we already have in the atmosphere right there, right? And of course, I have a dichotomy of it here, talking about the carbon dioxide constituting about 36.4 gigaton, while the non-carbon dioxide is constituting about 13.7 gigaton. Now, the global outlook for the carbon in itself, here we have, of course, I've mentioned initially that the global carbon house gas emission now is looking at is roughly around, of course, estimated a little above 50 gigaton of CO2. Now, the ones that are non-CO2 I've mentioned, the ones that are CO2 I've mentioned, now there is the part of the ones that are energy related. The ones that are energy related is also very key because it takes a very prominent part. And if you look at it here, the outlook says it's about 31.5 gigaton of CO2. And that's why energy related action is also a very big deal in solving the problem in which we have found ourselves. And that's why we talk about the Industrial Revolution being utilizing fossil fuel. And that's why there are so many advocacy about stopping the use of fossil fuel. By the time I joined the conversation today, I saw a video that was playing, and there were some group of young people talking about complete stop of fossil fuel. And let us now transit into renewable energy, right? Energy that will not cause havoc into the atmosphere. And of course, it's totally renewable. That's what the conversation is all about. Now we talk about the carbon CO2 emission from, of course, this is construction industry, and it's talking about the global per capita emission. Per capita emission is talking about what you as an individual, what myself, I can see Faith Solomon, right? What Faith Solomon is constituting to the environment, what Mohammed Adamu is constituting to the environment, what Aja Itsun, I hope I pronounced that correctly, right? What you're constituting the environment means that, oh, for you as an individual, when you look at the outlook of the entirety of the world, now for you as an individual, you have a part to play in the carbon that is in the atmosphere. Now that's what it's talking about when we talk about it per capita. So now for every individual in Motherhead, you are contributing about 4.47 tonnage of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And that is why your action and my action actually goes a long way to solving the problem in which we have today. Now, I just have a graphical representation of the carbon emission over the period of years that I was talking about, right? If you look at this graph, you will see 1750 back in the days, and you can see how the emission leveled up with the graph. It's considerably at zero. And that was the picture I was portraying the other time. I said, even though it might go up a little or come down a little, it has approximately remained the same, right? So you don't have any cause for alarm because Mother Earth is safe. But when the Industrial Revolution began to happen, 1860s to 1870s, when the first Industrial Revolution now takes its hold on the entire planet, and you see factories, industries, of course, emanating differently from different angles of the world, you can see the graph going up. And now we are already in the 2020 decade, right? Now this is 2023. And you can see what exactly is going on in this our decade. It has gone up so significantly. And this is talking about, of course, the CO2 part of the emission. You know, I told you the other time, there's the CO2 part, then there is the non-CO2 part. So now this graph now is showing us the CO2 part of it. And now it has gone so high. And you can see the significant rise within this short period of time. That means that whatever action that we are putting forward in this our fourth industrial revolution, we need to start checking it, right? We need to start putting forward action that can easily mitigate the effects. And now when we talk about the average per capita, of course, right from back in the days, there had been a level at which individual contributes to the per capita. But as at now, what is the situation? It has gone way up. And now that's why we need to start having some serious actions. Now, if you look at between the year 2020, right, you can see a little drop in that per capita. And I will explain why the drop actually showcases itself. It is simple. COVID-19 happened, and a lot of people stayed at home. People were not driving their cars. A lot of people, industry actually shut down, and you can see drastic drop in the per capita during this period. Now that everything is beginning to pick up, now we're beginning to go up again. Of course, this is not showing in the graph, but that's exactly what we're having. And so this means that this conversation we are having today, now we have about 300 people on the call, right, on this platform, even excluding those that are on YouTube stream, the live stream, right? But for those of us that are here now, imagine everybody coming from the Gambia, coming from Cote d'Ivoire, flying down maybe to one destination called the Ghana to come and have this kind of conversation. We would have actually burned so much fossil fuel because everybody will be flying around, right? But now we are having this same conversation virtually. So this is exactly some of the measures by which we can start reducing our impact on the environment. So this is actually a means. As much as it is small, it is something that you might want to think about. So the little action that you might not even think about, as small as you waking up in the morning to brush your teeth, right? When you woke up in the morning to brush your teeth, how much toothpaste did you put on your toothbrush? Some people are already laughing because you know you are guilty, right? Some people will fill the toothbrush up to the brim as if they want to swallow the toothpaste. You have to be considerate because moderacy is everything. The more you finish it, the more the manufacturer will produce more. So that your small action actually means something. So the respective action in which we put forward is what actually means something. And that is why this climate education is very important so that we can all understand that it is not about until we go out there to go plant a tree before we can start making forward movement and actions toward restoring back the mother earth. So the little you do in the room in which you stay, when you wake up and you go into the bathroom to take your bath, how much water did you waste? The enormous water that you waste in the bathroom actually means a lot, because you would need energy to pump back the water into the water tank when you could have just used small, so that you can have more time to utilize the water you have in the tank, right? These are actions that looks like they are not actions, but they are actions. So in our little respective ways, we can do so many things, right? That's talking about the graph. Now let's talk about who emits the most, right? Because that's also a very, very important conversation that we must have. Now we're talking about emission. Then we can now start thinking about, now who are those that are emitting even the most? Now, to what extent do we emit, right? And who are supposed to be the ones that are supposed to bear the brunt the most? And that's the graphical representation which we have today, right? You can see the Asia taking about 19 billion tons of carbon dioxide. That's about 53% of the global emission. 53, just one continent. 53%, right? And now out of the 53, oh no, not out of the 53%. Now, out of the 100% that we have allocated for everybody on planet Earth, China takes 27%. That's huge. That's huge. So now that's why the question of when you are beginning to emit so much into the atmosphere, you need to also pay the brunt. Developing countries that emit small, you need to start putting forward measures to be able to help those respective countries to be able to, because you're actually causing serious damage into the atmosphere, into the mother earth in itself. So, and if you want to restore mother earth, some people are not actually emitting up to you. And then that means there should be a world sanctioning to some of these global gigantic emitters into the atmosphere for them to be able to pay the brunt and also do something to be able to salvage the situation for developing countries that are putting forward measures to be able to salvage the situation we have for the mother earth. India is taking about 2.5 billion tons and is about 6.8% on the global space, right? We have the North America taking about 18% global emission. Europe is about 17%, right? Then you can see the blue. The blue is where Africa belongs, right? And you can see Africa taking about 3.7%, 3.7%. And South America taking about 3.2% global emission. But mind you, the 1.3 billion tons of carbon dioxide that is being emitted in Africa is by you and by me, and by these respective companies and corporations that are emitting so much into the atmosphere. So the action that you put forward today and the action I put forward today will help in a very long way in at least salvaging the situation by reducing this 1.3 billion tons that we have out there to a considerable level, right? And we have the Oceania taking about 0.5 billion tons, which is about 1.3 global emission. This is just a typical global outlook of what the emission looks like out there. Now let's talk about some of the implications of having fallen into the ditch of the climate change effect in which we find ourselves today. I just outlined some few. Of course, we have several. And of course, wildfire. We have wildfire very recently in California. We have some wildfire recently in Canada. And several keeps coming up on a daily. So even if you want to continue to update, you'll be tired. Because these are major effects of climate change. See the severe droughts, risks famine in Somalia, United Nations warns. Thousands of Australian flee homes as flood inundate towns, right? These are some of the headlines that you find day in, day out, right? Texas wildfire destroy 86 homes, and most of small towns. And of course, you have global flood loses its about $82 billion were lost last year because of flood, global flood, right? And of course, the World Economic Forum mentioned that in the past 20 years, about 7,000, of course, this number must have been updated by now because I didn't update this, my slide. About 7,348 disasters have been recorded. And of course, way more than that, even within the space of the time I prepared this slide, and today, as we speak, at so many other disasters have been recorded, which of course must have been updated. These are the effects of climate change, and these are the implications in which we're talking about. The World Health Organization in 2008 had predicted that climate change is expected to increase the death rate by between 60 to 80% in Africa, more than in any other region by 2030. And that's why it's important in Africa. So if climate change is going to be affecting us or impairing us this much, then we need to start taking actions. And we need to start putting forward our voices out there so that even the global emitters, those that are taking the brunt of it, those that are taking the major chunk of emitting into the atmosphere, are doing something in our space, because they are actually causing so many damages in our continent, because we all stay in the same space called the Mother Earth. And the fact that we stay in the same space called the Mother Earth means that your action and my action actually, in a way, would have to meet at the middle ground. So your action towards the environment will do something to the environment, and my action into the environment will also do something to the environment. And climate change is expected to have a worse impact on agricultural yield in Africa than in any other region of the world. This was a research by Iglesias and Rosenzweig thereabouts in 2010. And of course, we are seeing that effect taking its hold in our days today, right? Between 75 and 250 million people will suffer from increased water stress. There's so much water stress now, flood everywhere, and you can't utilize the water. And where there is no flood, there is so much drought. And that's exactly what we're experiencing. And these are effects of climate change. I wouldn't want to dwell too much because we have so many of them. 10 to 15% of sub-Saharan species will be at risk of extinction. We're talking about that biodiversity. So if we don't want our sub-Saharan species, our pride of Africa, we don't want it to go into extinction, then we have to take it seriously, right? Now, I've been talking about some of the implications that we have. I've been talking about, I haven't talked about the climate change in its effect and everything. Then we need to talk about how myself and yourself can make a difference. And that was why when I was starting the conversation earlier, I mentioned that as much as we're going to be having the conversation about, oh, what's this, what's that, what's climate change, and blah, 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 understanding it, we still need to be able to at least talk to ourselves, one another. And of course, if we are going to be going out there, because more like this is a teach the trainer session. So if you are going to go out there to also train people and teach them, you must be able to give them actionable acts for them to be able to act for the climate change in itself. So the question comes, how can I make a difference? So that's the question you're asking yourself today. How can you make a difference? How can I make a difference? One of the ways you can do that is to grow your own food. Grow your own food. You can actually have something at your backyard called a garden and harvest maybe the little that you can harvest. Vegetables, fruits, have different kind of things at your backyard. It doesn't cost much. Growing your own food is healthier because you'll be eating it fresh. Some people are smiling because some people are witnessing that. You eat it fresh because when you need it, you just go right in there, pluck it. That means you are healthier when you eat something very fresh, right? It's not something that had been harvested some one week ago before they even transport it to the market. Before you now get there to buy, and another 1 week is gone. Before you now start saying you bring it to the house, and you now keep it for another 2-3 days before you now eventually put it in the pot of soup, right? You can just go to your backyard and pluck it. It's more healthier. These are ways you can actually put forward actions. Great for kids because it also engages them and give them opportunities to be able to act and, of course, react with the environment, interact with the environment. It also reduces your stress because it is another means of you exercising your body because you can easily go to the garden, do 1 or 2 things, right? And also it's also helping the environment and it will save you money. Fantastic, right? So these are some of the ways in which you can put forward action. You can see that little girl trying to water the garden. That's amazing. Why are these things going to extinction? If you go to several of these big cities that we have, you hardly can find things like this, right? But these things should not go into extinction. These are things we must bring back into our livelihood. It is very important. Another way we can act, we can make a difference, is use renewable shopping bags, right? When you're going to the mall, go with a renewable bag. Do not use leathers or what they call it, nylons, polythenes, plastics. Try as much as possible to use renewable shopping bags. The amount of petroleum that is used to make these bags could drive a car around the world 1,076 times. Is that not serious? So 50 million plastic bags litters the environment every year, and we take about 100 years to degrade. So you can imagine this. So now, by the time we put forward 50 million plastics on a yearly basis, and it will take 100 years, no, not 100, it will take 100 years. So it could be 200 years, it could be more, right? For them to degrade. And we keep turning it into the atmosphere on a yearly. So exactly what are we building? We are building piles of things that will never degrade. And of course, they are causing so much into the atmosphere. Carbon that will eventually warm up the earth. And of course, litters everywhere. And of course, the degrading. Imagine this kind of litters going into the ocean, kills the biodiversity, different species that we have in there, right? And these are actions that we can do by just using a renewable shopping bag. So your action and my action can actually make the difference. Right, some of the actions you can put forward is collect rainwater. Use the rainwater to water your house plants and garden. Use rainwater, it is good, right? Because if you use it, you'll be using less of pumping of water every time, even if you need to water your garden and do several other things, right? Don't throw them away. You have stuffs, don't throw them away. Upcycling is not a big deal. If you have items that you no longer need or use, give them to someone else who might need them, or convert it to something else that will be of use to you, right? Very recently, in the organization in which I work, we have a project we're working with the United Nations on called the Global Week Project. It is the largest conversation on climate change, where you have portals located in different locations across the world, right? We have one in Nigeria, and Nigeria hosted one very recently called Upcycling. We had an event we held called Upcycling, where kids were asked to bring different attires which they no longer need, which they no longer use. They brought them to the portal and they were transformed by the work of art. Now, several of them are reusing those clothes. And of course, those clothing were supposed to have been trashed, but now they are reusing it by the power of upcycling. So in my problem, I want to look at upcycling as a very big deal, something that is very substantial that you can use as a tool for you to be able to put forward action out there. Take your vehicle for repairs and maintenance on a regular basis. Some people, the mileage would have turned off to the point where they are supposed to have maintained, but they would never do that. They will still want to drive it up until they start seeing smoke come from the silencer, right? From the exhaust. All right, that's not healthy. Take your vehicle for repairs on a regular, because that in itself will reduce emission that your vehicle will generate into the atmosphere. These are some of the actions which you can put forward. And it doesn't require money for you to do some of these things. It just requires your consciousness. So knowing that when you do this, you're acting for nature, right? Turn off bulbs when not being used. When you don't need to use a bulb, turn it off. By so doing, you are cutting the energy, the amount of energy that you are supposed to have consumed. At the same time, you're also saving costs, because this can as well save your costs. So these are some of the ways we can put forward action. Purchase recycled toilet paper. The last time I had this conversation with somebody with a group like this, somebody was asking me a recycled toilet paper. I've never seen one, right? Of course, I even have some in my homes, right? Recycled toilet paper that you can use and wash and reuse again. They are very good. If you have opportunity to be able to get one, buy it, purchase it, use it. So because they do not involve cutting down trees for production. That way you will be discouraging deforestation. It is another way of putting forward action. Send electronics wedding invitation, not just wedding invitation, party invitation, different kind of birthday invitation, different kind of invitation. This will save paper and of course save trees ultimately, right? These are some of the ways in which you can put forward actions. Use your phone or computer for note taking. rather than continuous use of dependence on paper. Try as much as possible to cut a little bit off from using paper, because that will be discouraging deforestation and will be doing the planet very, very great deal of a good, right? Save gift bags and boxes for future use. That's also a way you can also act for nature. You have several of them. Use clothes rags instead of tissue paper, because when you use clothes, they are reusable and you can always wash them and use them again. But when you use tissue paper, you trash them instantly, right? Dispose waste properly. Some waste material are not eco-friendly. Do not mix them up with biodegradable wastes. When you have plastic waste, sort them accordingly. Put plastic where plastic belongs. Put glass where glass belongs. Put the biodegradable waste where they belong. So by so doing, you will be helping the environment in its entirety. Take a shower instead of a long bath. I think I mentioned this earlier on, right? It's important for you to take a shower, not a long bath. Try as much as possible to put forward these actions, because you will be saving water that way and you will be saving Mother Earth. Acquire basic sewing skills, because when you acquire basic sewing skills, you won't be throwing away majority of the clothing you throw away very often. When it tears, you will be able to quickly sew it back and reuse it. The patch hole and sew button, of course, you need to patch holes and sew button, because by the time you do that, those clothing will still be usable for you. But when you don't do that, you consider them useless and you want to trash them, right? These are some of the things. And of course, before we go, I want us to learn from Todd Parr. This is actually an exciting learn, right? And I want you to follow me as I go, because it's also very key. He has given some insightful, kid-oriented approaches to ways in which we can also act, which is very fantastic. And look at this. He says, I take care of the earth because I know I can do little thing every day to make a big difference. Some of the things I mentioned are just few out of many things that we can do, because your small action that you consider small can make a big difference. Now, this is a lesson from Todd Parr. I use both sides of the paper. By so doing, you will elongate the timeline. You need to use a book rather than just waste it and utilize it and it's done. You go pick another book, you go purchase another one. And by so you are going to be encouraging deforestation, cutting down so many trees, which of course is not friendly, not eco-friendly. And bring my own bags to the market. I have mentioned this, right? So these are just some lessons from Todd Parr. You can see everybody bringing their bags to the market to buy. It will discourage the use of polythene, right? He said, I turn off the faucet while I brush my teeth. Some people will do it deliberately. Once you're brushing, you turn on the faucet and you don't turn it off until you are done. The water keeps running out, right? By so doing, you're wasting away the resources that we have in Mother Earth. So these little things are things that look like it doesn't matter, but then it does matter. You can use less of water for my bath. He said he loves the fish, because if he loves the fish, he will try as much as possible to stop several degrading waste that goes into the ocean that kills several of these fishes, right? Because if you love it, that means you want it to always continue to be in the water so that you can always continue to see it. And the children yet unborn can, of course, always continue to see it. And I want the ocean to stay blue. If you want the ocean to always continue to stay blue, then you can consider this as, oh, okay, I need to start putting forward action in my respective area. I take the school bus, right? These are for kids when we want to teach them, right? At the same time, it is also for us. Of course, Lagos State government introduced something called the BRT. The BRT bus is actually a bus, a public bus that is a little bit very comfortable. I say a little bit and I say very, because it is quite comfortable to an extent. At the same time, you probably wouldn't have to drive in traffic over a long period or over a long distance. At the same time, you would be paying a little, and at the same time, you will also be saving emissions that you probably must have put out there into the atmosphere, right? Because sometimes it helps. And ride my back because I love the stars and I want the air, right? If you want the air and you don't want a very stale air, Of course, if you go to some local areas of maybe your country, you would notice that the way you breathe is actually very sweet and superb. But when you go to the major city, you would notice that the air is a little polluted and clogged. And that's exactly the situation in which we find ourselves in this changing industrial revolution world, right? So for us to be able to, of course, see a very clear air to breathe in, and for us to be able to breathe in fresh air that will also be good for our health, we need to start thinking about putting forward these actions. Also, you want the air to be clear so you can see the stars sparkle. So he said, I try to eat every bite on my plate. That's also something very important. Some of us are just wasteful for no reason. Being wasteful is bad for the environment because you continue to put forward waste, and the waste that you generate, somebody else probably might have utilized. So it is important you pass it on to somebody else rather than waste it and trash it. So use these habits on a daily. And of course, you are putting forward action as an individual. And you can utilize some of these as a collective effort to put forward action to, of course, rescuing the Mother Earth. And of course, you want to save the leftovers because you don't want to trash them and waste them or pass it on to the next person. And he's saying if he wants to do all of that because he wants the earth to always continue to be. And at this point, I would want to say, thank you very much for listening. And before I go, I always like to end with this note, which is very, very vital and important. And of course, it's talking about you. As you're looking at me right now, this is about you. Because it says the same way, one single tree, that means the same way you as an individual. So it's looking like that. When you say one single tree, look at that tree that you see out there. The one I put up is just one, right? You can see how it can shelter so many people. More than 300 people are sitting down under this singular tree. And if you see it this way, that if that one tree can be this useful, it simply means that your action, that's your one single deed, can transform many lives and can have effect and impact on so many lives. So you need to be intentional with your deeds today to positively impact lives, because it's a story of the value of one single tree. So I want you to always have this at the back of your mind. The value of one single tree can actually transmit to myself having a value that I will transfer onto so many people. I will be able to, of course, bless so many people and transform so many lives with my one singular deed. Thank you for having me today, and thank you for listening to all that I have to say.
Thank you
Mr.
very much
Over to you.
for this wonderful and insightful lecture. Very, very engaging. And I can see a lot of comments. Please let that comment keep coming. Let's show Dr. Somin some love, and maybe through a emoji or comments here. And even those who are on YouTube, use the comment section. I want to see your feedback as regards to this session. Absolutely, it has been an engaging one and enlightening one. Sincerely appreciate you, Dr. Somi, for this wonderful series which you led in line to today's core purpose of learning. We appreciate you so much, sir. Right about now, we are going to be taking questions, and for those of us that are on YouTube, we appreciate you make use of the comment section to ask your question. Please, there's someone that has been drawing on the screen since morning. Let's stop that. Let's stop that. You can, I believe we should be able to make use of the Zoom platform very well. We have to start drawing on our facilitator screen. Please, if you have a question, I would appreciate you raise your name. Raise your hand rather, and for those who their name are properly in the right format, those are the ones that we are going to acknowledge. And those that are on YouTube, I would like to start from the YouTube participants without leaving them behind. We value your participation. Please, if you're on the YouTube, kindly drop your question through the comment section, and we are going to pick it up from there and share with our facilitator for today. While we check for comments, questions from YouTube, I'll just take two questions from those of us on Zoom. and Doctor is going to respond to the questions. So we start from...
But all stakeholders have an important role to play. Industries, businesses, and finding solutions for goods and services that align with the SDGs, and communities.
Can you please unmute your mic and ask your question? Fumilola, can you unmute your mic and ask your question? Just in 30 seconds, please. We appreciate you ask your question. Fumilola, can you unmute your mic and ask your question? If you can. Okay, if Fumilola is not there, can we have Priscilla? Priscilla, can you unmute your mic?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, my question is, first of all, I would like to appreciate the anchor today and to some insightful. My question is, you talked about planting of we should plant our own fruit as a way of saving the atmosphere. And I want to ask, planting of food has to do with you having your own environment, not as a tenant, having your own land. Because you as a tenant trying to go and plant, it will cause very big problem in your compound. And again, you talked about we should always use them.
What's the question? What's the question? What's the question you want to ask?
The question is, how will you as a tenant?
Okay. How will you as a tenant?
Yes. Start planting tree, yes.
Okay, just in a minute is going to respond to that. Can we have Hello, can we say so? From Uganda, you can unmute your mic and ask your question if you are there.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello. Okay, I want to thank the presenter for his wonderful presentation today. It has been good that has been talking about climate change. But when you come to Africa, for example, in my country, Uganda, you'll find that the climate or the environment is most degraded by the rich people. Because we poor people, we can manage to conserve our environment and maybe conserve our climate. Now, there is a gap between the poor and the rich. Now, my question is, how can a poor or someone who is poor from a poor background reach that rich person to teach him or her about the climatic conservation? How can we cross that gap between the rich and the poor such that our climate can be conserved? Thank you.
Okay, over to you, Doctor. We appreciate you respond to the first two questions before we take the next one, sir.
All right, thank you very much. And sincere appreciation for those questions. Right, just to jump onto the first one that was asking about how we can grow our own food as a tenant, right? Being a tenant does not debar you from growing one or two things. Growing your own food does not necessarily mean that you have to grow every bit of what you eat in your home. Growing your own food simply means that what you can do within your space to be able to leverage on as a form of vegetable that you're growing or vegetation that you're growing within your or confined space goes a long way. Growing your own food can simply means that you have a pot of flour that instead of having a flour in it, you have aloe vera, right? It could also even mean that maybe you have another level of, 1, 2, 3 things in your balcony that generates something for you. It could be vegetable, it could be anything. And you can have it even in a confined space. It does not necessarily have to be that you have to go disturb the entirety of everybody within the space in which you find yourself before you're able to grow something, right? So, and those that have the privilege of having a very big backyard where they can have a garden, then they can have more. During the time of maize, then they can have maize plantation. During this time of even yam, maybe they can have maybe yam plantation or what have you within the confines of their space. But if you don't have those space, even if it is the little thing that you can do in that space, it doesn't hurt for you to be able to do something and at least see something grow in your space. It's fantastic. It could also even be flower. Maybe you have a natural flower that you nurture, and of course you water on a daily. Just try as much as possible to nurture something that generates carbon dioxide, right? A plant that actually will mean well to the environment and also mean well to you as an individual. So grow your own food in that context does not necessarily mean that you have to grow the entirety of whatever it is you eat, right? I don't know if that exactly particularly answers the question, but I would from there just go straight onto the second question, talking about how can the poor reach the rich and advocate about climate action. It is simple. How you can reach the rich is for you to advocate at your own space. You necessarily do not have to reach the rich, and you necessarily do not have to confine yourself to reaching the poor. All you just need to do is do what you have to do in the space in which you are able to do it. And before you know what's happening, you will see a lot of turning the tides that you are making in that your respective space. So it is not about or dichotomy about whether you are poor or you are rich. It is a dichotomy of we are all human beings and we need to do something in our respective space. So when you do something in your respective space, and if it comes to the aspect of advocacy, for an example, there are battalions of where you can advocate, and it will reach whether it be rich or whether it be poor. A typical example is if you're advocating, for an example, you are on a social media platform, Facebook, for an example, and you decide to put forward actions that people can do and start generating followings, and several people start following your trend because they see what you do as meaningful and something they can envisage, something they can actually follow and copy. It is irrespective of whether the person is rich or poor. They will follow your trend and always want to, of course, associate with whatever it is you do and begin to learn lessons from what you do. So it is not just about whether you are rich or you're poor. That is one. If you are maybe gathering a group of volunteers in your locality and you want everybody to put forward action that you might actually even start with 2 or 3 individuals. Before you know what's happening, several other volunteers will begin to crop in and begin to join your force. And now among those that are going to join your force, you will see both the rich and the poor joining your force because they also like what you do and they also want to be a part of it. So it is irrespective of whether you're poor or rich, if I would want to answer that question that way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Somi, for the insightful response.
I think I'm done. Mr. Emmanuel, is it?
Thank you very much, Doctor, for the insightful response you gave. And we sincerely appreciate you, sir. And right about now, I would like to take the next set of questions. Maybe we just take 3 before we end this call. And let me call on Aziz from Nigeria. Please unmute your mic and ask your question. While Vincent from Ghana prepare to ask the question.
All right. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. My question is this. Actually, I'm a chemistry and maths teacher, and over time, when we go for competition or even on TV, you see people being celebrated for generating biogas from waste. So, well, we were taught that if you use biogas contains methane. So methane is more of a threat compared to carbon dioxide. So it's better to just burn the methane and generate carbon dioxide, which is also a greenhouse gas. So my question is this: the fact that people are being celebrated for generating biogas, and in one way they are solving the problem, but the problem still remains there. I want your take on this, sir, based on your exposure and experience.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm not sure if I'm clear with that question.
Please recap your question. Can you come again on your question? Hello, Aziz, please kindly come again with your question, just in a summary. What exactly is the question what exactly is the aspect you want him to clarify?
Okay, so what the question is this: should we really be celebrating people for generating biogas, or is the international organizations like United Nations, do they really see it as a solution for us to be generating biogas, because methane is much of a threat compared to more of a threat compared to carbon dioxide? Both of them are threats. They are greenhouse gases, but methane is a stronger greenhouse gas when you compare with carbon dioxide. So I'm asking, is that a way forward for us to be generating biogas? Is that one of the actions that we can take to mitigate the?
Okay. Yeah, let's take the question from Vicent from Uganda. Please, you can unmute your mic. Why Eric from Kenya prepared to ask his question as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Emmanuel, and thank you, Doctor, for this great presentation. Actually, today is my first time having a thorough presentation and discussion concerning climate. My question is, I haven't been so much in climate, but there's something that I've been seeing people doing. For example, politicians and other so-called activists, they wake up one day, they go and pick polythene bags on the streets, then they ban the polythene. I don't know if it is right, and what can doctors say about that? Thank you.
Okay. Doctor, did you get our question, sir?
No, the last part. I didn't get the last part.
Vicent, please, can you?
Okay. Like my question was, people who pick rubbish on the streets or on the roadsides and ban it, what can you say about that? Is it right? Is it the right thing? Is it justice to the environment? Thank you.
Okay, we take one more question now. Can we have Eric from Kenya? Eric from Kenya, can you open your mic?
Okay, thank you. My question is very simple. I wanted our facilitator today to give us a difference between, we'll talk about global warming and climate change. Can you comment clearly on the difference between the two terms, global warming and climate change? Thank you.
Okay, over to you, sir. We appreciate you. Before we take the very last sets.
All right. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Let me just quickly react to the questions we have here now. The first one is straight to the point, says, should we celebrate people for generating biogas, right? Biogas is a level of energy that we actually generate from the waste that we have generated into the atmosphere. So rather than have that waste being burnt, the second question I was saying, is it right to pick waste from the street and burn it, right? So instead of having that waste being burnt in such a manner by which the second questioner was asking, that is it right? If you pick those waste and you can in turn turn it to a level of energy that you would be able to utilize, that in itself means or goes a long way. So instead of you depending on fossil fuel, that means the waste in which you generate that you're supposed to have trashed so that it will go and be burnt and we generate more emission into the atmosphere, you are converting some of this waste into energy that you can utilize. Yes, there is an understanding there that some of this byproducts of the biogas could contain the gas called the methane. Of course, the methane I mentioned earlier, I think methane was even part of one of the major gas that I mentioned when I was talking about the non-CO2 gas that constitutes the greenhouse gas emission, right? Methane, for an example, would, it's a more dangerous gas, just like you mentioned. It's more dangerous than CO2, but we stayed considerably at a lower time in the atmosphere before it burns off, compared to carbon dioxide that will stay for 1,000 years. It's like having, say, there is somebody who have a sickness called the malaria, and another having a sickness called the no, I wouldn't use the word I will probably use maybe HIV, something that is, of course, these two can actually even take life in itself. So they are dangerous. So now let's look at malaria as even maybe as deadly as HIV could be, but in itself, it is not something that can completely take your life in terms of you have a period of time in which it will stay and it will go away. But if you stick with HIV or AIDS in itself, AIDS, that would not, okay, I think we should just use HIV and AIDS, right? If you have HIV symptoms, you can treat it over the period of time, right? But if that person has AIDS, then of course it becomes so chronic to the point where over a very long period of years in which you will live, but that person probably would have that AIDS. And of course, that can actually cause death. So when you look at the two in itself, of course, it's not like promoting methane, but it's like using two-edged tool to two-edged sword, and you are using it the right way. So you use in trying to solve the problem of waste. At the same time, of course, it is way more better than emitting that carbon that is actually going to stay as long as it takes for humanity to exist, for it to be able to go away. And that's why you have the issue of carbon sequestration. So now the carbon sequestration aspect of the climate change action is talking about you now taking out the carbon that you have in the atmosphere. So now measures are now being put in place to see how much carbon you cannot take it out of the atmosphere. So now for you to be able to take carbon out of the atmosphere, it will take enormous work. It is not just, of course, something that maybe an individual can say, oh, let me just jump into this space and begin to do. These are big, you require big machinery, and you're talking about carbon sinking. Like you want to sink in carbon into the underground. So you require quite a number of things that, of course, goes in the billions of dollars if you want to actually solve and salvage that situation. So as much as it is, biogas is still a level of renewed, so to speak. I'm not using the word renewable because you will burn it off completely, right? But of course, you are renewing the waste that you should have trashed, right? And you are utilizing it to generate an energy for you. And of course, that in itself means it is a means of solving the problem in which we have. And just like I mentioned to you, every problem might not necessarily mean that that problem is restoring back climate. And that was why when I started the conversation, I was talking about the climate action in three-legged tools, right? You have the climate adaptation actions, then you have the climate mitigation actions, and you have the climate restoration. So the climate adaptation action means that you want to adapt to the situation in which you have, right? So that means there are actions you want to put forward in that space that also need to be celebrated because you are also doing something, even though it is not a complete revamp of the entire system, but you are doing something to salvage the situation. You are way better off than somebody who is just throwing more into the atmosphere and not taking back, right? So that I believe would answer the first question. And that also resonates to the second question, asking if it is right or not right to pick up waste from the street and burn it. It is right, 100%, to pick up waste from the street. And picking it up means a very good deal for the environment. When you now turn it out to eventually go burn it, Now, it now depends on the level at which you want to burn. Do you want to burn it in an insulator in a confined space where you are able to even capture the carbon? Because there's something called carbon capturing. In case that terminology also look new, it simply means that there is a way in which you can actually throw carbon into the atmosphere and capture it, and not particularly allow it to go out there and escape into the atmosphere. So you might be looking at it from the perspective of, oh, when you burn, you capture the carbon, so it doesn't go out there. You don't release that carbon into the atmosphere. That is a way to go. So you might be looking in this direction, and of course, this will mean 100% right. So now, but when you now pick up those wastes, and of course, there are some wastes you even pick, not just about even burning it. Some of them, you don't even sort them. So you mix the bag, just like I mentioned earlier, you mix it with a glass, you mix it with a plastic. So it's difficult for you to even sort when you want to sort. That's another thing you probably also might want to look at. That is also not right. So even picking it up is right, but when you don't sort them, it's also not right. So that's another thing that you probably might also want to consider and look at. So now I'm not going to the extent to say you just want to burn it in the open, and also still, it's as good as anybody burning it anywhere. So you have not done anything good by picking it and going to burn it, because anybody can burn it anyway, right? But you have done a level of good by saying you picked it from here for the sake of littering, right? But then when you burn it, of course, it is not a measure by which, or action by which we salvage the earth, just like we mentioned. And the last question I was asking, the greenhouse gas and the climate change, I think I quite a bit dealt on this on my first slide. If I would want to go back to the first slide for the questioner, I hope. Greenhouse gas emission in itself is talking about the composition of all the gases, be it carbon dioxide, be it the methane, and several other gases on the, of course, ethane, different kind of methane, blah, 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 what have you, right? Propane, different kind of gases in that space. You have several of them, all of them put together, that keeps the earth warming, that keeps changing our weather condition, right? That keeps putting our environment in serious earth challenges in terms of change in temperature, right? And putting us in an extreme weather. That is the GHG, the greenhouse gas, right? And now when you're talking about climate change, then you're now talking about that change that happens in that temperature through the means of the greenhouse gases. So now the greenhouse gases are the ones that causes those extreme weathers, the change in temperature. Now, I don't know if you'll be able to dissect the difference between what the climate change is talking about, what the greenhouse gas causes, right? They cause the change in temperature, the extreme weather, precipitation that happen out there, and that's of course what the climate change is all about. So now I'm not quite sure if that answers pretty well what you're looking for, but of course, to an extent, I believe that will be able to solve the concern you have about trying to understand the greenhouse gas and the climate change. And I think there was one question, sorry, just let me just quickly react to one. I saw it on the chat and I think it was very nice. So because somebody said in solving the climate problem, don't we think that indirectly we are creating another problem? Because I made mention of an example that the person also referred to, and that's the aspect of minimizing the use of toothpaste in order to be able to reduce the amount of being produced. Being produced is one thing. Of course, it's not being produced alone. There are several other things that, of course, you also save money, because if you keep wasting it, because the word is waste, there is a concise level you should use. I'm not saying use the one that will be detrimental to you, but use the concise amount that is good enough to wash or brush your teeth. That's all. So I'm not saying reduce it up to the point that you will not even be able to brush your teeth. You'll not be using your brush to brush your teeth. That's not what I'm saying, right? So the person is saying, which indirectly will reduce the emission of gases. Don't you think that it's indirectly affecting us and blah, 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 what have you? So I'm not saying that reduce it considerably. When I say take a shower, I'm not saying just put one bowl of water on you and run out. You will take a shower, normal moderate shower, but some people will spend 10 minutes to just enjoy the water, right? So that's what we're talking about. The long bath is what you're talking about. The reduction in the wasteful use of the toothpaste is what we're talking about. We're not talking about the considerable use of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Somi, for these insightful responses which you've shared with us. And we still have a lot of hands up. However, I would like to seek your presence and indulgence to please take some time with us to attend to these questions. We have some questions on YouTube, and these participants are a great set of people that I really don't like to miss out when I'm moderating sessions like this. We have 4 questions from YouTube, and I'm going to be reading them briefly. The very first question it's from Jane Chris Onyechi, that how do the difference listed restore the climate back to its original change to benefit mankind and reduce carbon emission? Then related to that question is, can we totally restore the climate back to its original state following the example cited at the course of these studies? Trading rather. Then there's another question from Khadijat Olake Samuel. Will it be good for the environment if the waste, especially the plastic bags, are buried or used in place of sand filling? There is a question from Baba Ibrahim that in regard to nylon use minimizing, if burnt nylon after use, do we help? Okay, if burnt nylon after use, do we help in promoting a good climate? And there is another question that is still related to nylon, polyethylene nylons. I said, please, how can we stop complaints from producing polyethylene nylon and plastic, having discovered the negative effects on the ecosystem? So we appreciate you attend to this question, sir.
Okay, of course, some of those questions are very fast, and I hope I was able to get everything. So I will just be reacting one after the other. How does this difference, of course, reduce the climate change? Some of the actions that we are going to put forward, how can some of these differences reduce the climate change we put out there, right? The climate change effects in which we're talking about. And of course, it resonates with the second questioner that was asking if we can restore climate back to its original state with some of the examples that were appropriated during the course of the presentation, right? All right, I'm talking about the climate change in itself, right? Exactly the way I mentioned it when I was trying to end the conversation. I said, the value of one single tree. The value of one single tree means that you have a responsibility and I have a responsibility. So now this approach is talking about the approach of how you as an individual can do something. Now, collectively, you would be able to do great things, right? When you now begin to put forces together to be able to talk about maybe in the like of the generation of biogas now, one singular person might not be able to handle that all by itself, but when they put forces together, bring in a set of team and they work together, they'll be able to achieve some of that. Now, you're talking in terms of another level of action that you can put forward. But I believe that the first level of action that we want to talk about is what you can do in your respective places as an individual, and what you can as well teach some of these your kids in your respective schools, right? To be able to put forward actions in their respective schools, something they can do, and something they can get home and teach their parents to do. Because here we're talking about the per capita. So if you're talking about per capita, you're talking about your own contribution and my own contribution to making the world a better place or making it a more critical place. So now that is why you have some of these examples cited, right? And some of these examples are small as it is. Now just imagine a drop of water brought in by 1 million people, maybe one liter of water, for an example, brought in by 1 million people. How many liters of water will you be having? 1 liter of water brought in by 1 million will give you 1 million liters, right? So now that looks exactly like the kind of action that we're talking about here. So as much as it is very small and minute, if you are looking at it from only your own perspective, it is also very critical when everyone gets the message and begin to act in this manner, then you begin to see difference. It is a typical, let me just give you a typical example. You stay in a place where in front of your house, you have dug one small pit where everybody trash, right? You trash it, and at intervals, maybe on a Saturdays, on a weekly basis, you burn those trashes. So if this is the practice, the usual practice in your environment, right? And now there is an organization that specializes in plastic waste, and we incentivize you for giving them some of the plastic waste that you generate from your homes. It simply means that in that pit in which you have in front of your house, you probably wouldn't be finding plastic waste there anymore, because everybody will want to utilize the opportunity to be able to get the plastic waste and go get some money because it is being incentivized. And these are some of the few actions that we're talking about. Now, if you as an individual now take it upon yourself to sort the waste and package the plastic, find those that are in need of it, to be able to utilize some of this plastic as raw materials, because you already have enormous of it in the environment. And if everybody now begin to take consciousness of this, you will discover that the pit that you have dug right in front of your house will probably have no more waste, because the biodegradable wood waste, in terms of the spoiled food, the different things that you know that can degrade, everybody takes care of it, because you know that somebody will use it to actually generate energy in his home. So you won't go trash it, because you know that you already have a gas stove that requires those particular waste. So anytime you have those waste, you utilize it for it. So by the time you utilize that and you take out the plastic, there is already an incentive for glass, for an example, glass waste. You're already getting incentive for that. So now this little action, as little as it seems, by the time you start putting everything, putting the T's and crossing the T's and dotting the I's on every aspect of some of this waste that is being generated, you will discover that that pit in front of your home will probably have no more waste there. And before you know what's happening, that simply means that you're no longer burning what everybody used to go there on the Saturdays to burn, on every Saturdays, on a weekly basis to burn, and continue to add more into the atmosphere. So that in itself, you call it off. So now all of these measures translate one to another, and they're linked, they're intertwined. So you can't, of course, say you want to do one and leave the other. So when you are taking measures, then you are taking the full measure of it. So now the first thing is for you to imbibe these habits and attitude in you, for you to be able to say you want to advocate and preach to others. Because if you want to preach to others and you are doing otherwise, of course, in itself, already, you would even not be able to have the entirety of mouth to be able to preach the gospel. When I was talking about the renewable, the reusable toilet paper the other time, I mentioned that I have it in my home. I have a biogas stove in my home. I have an inverter system for energy in my home. I virtually almost generate my own energy myself from the sun, right? These measures, you need to start practicalizing it, because if you practicalize it, you see how much you save, then you have much more energy to be able to go preach it to the others, to those people that you want them to listen. By the time you do it yourself and you see the enormous benefit in it, then you will be able to have the boldness to be able to preach it to others. So now preaching it to others is one thing, but first we need to, of course, imbibe that habit in ourselves. And when you do that, those little examples that you think does not matter will now be the major important thing that we need in our society for us to be able to restore back Earth into its original state. What will happen is that over number of years, period of years, that spot that everybody used to put their waste and burn it on a regular, if you don't do it in 1 week, if you don't do it in another week, you leave it for 1 month, you leave it for 3 months, you leave it for 4 months, will grasses and shrubs not begin to grow there? If they begin to grow there, what's happening there? It simply means that that place is getting restored back to its original state. And that's exactly how your action and my action and the little things and examples that we have can actually make a difference. I hope that answers it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Somi, for these wonderful insights which you've shared with us. This has been an impactful session indeed, and we know that we are loaded, we are loaded with a lot of knowledge and lessons which you've shared with us this evening. And on behalf of the leadership of Advanced Initiative for International Development, we sincerely want to say a big thank you, sir, for this session out of your very busy schedule, and you are still able to make it this evening. We sincerely appreciate you. Right about now, I would like to, I know that's, okay, I can see some comments here. You can just say thank you to Dr. Somi for the wonderful session. Yeah, thank you so much, sir. And we look forward to having some other further engagement, and wish you a restful and productive weekend indeed. Thank you so much. Before we end today's call, I would just quickly like to share one or two information which is very, very important with us. For those of us that are on the Zoom and also on the YouTube platform, please, it's very important for us to, okay, let me start this way. The WhatsApp link is filled already. The WhatsApp community is filled already, and a new WhatsApp has been created, which was shared with us via email today. And it's very important for us to join those who could not join the WhatsApp, the main group. But please, if you already belong to the previous group, don't bother joining the new group again. Then the tracking and evaluation form for today has been shared. Those of us that are on YouTube, it's been pinned at the upper part of the YouTube platform. Let's ensure we share back our evaluation, and also send back our feedbacks, know more how we can serve you better in the forthcoming workshop series. And most importantly, this will also serve as a tracking mode for you also to know those who have been present in all the masterclass series. And the series will always hold. Our next session is going to be tomorrow, 4:30 p.m. Same Zoom link. The new YouTube link will be going to be shared with us. And also a link has been provided for learning resources. There are some new learning resources that have been shared with us outside what we are also going to learn. It's still related to what we are learning at the workshop series, but it's also important. These are PDF which you can use to learn at our own very convenient time, and you can get to study and know more about SDGs, about sustainability and various aspects as it relates to sustainable development. Then there is also a self-paced course link that has been shared with us. Let's endeavor to go on those courses. You can take these courses and also get instant certificates for it. And there are some that they will request that you pay. You don't need to pay. You can apply for maybe a free scholarship, and at the end of it, or you can get to have the certificate free of charge. So the person that is asking for a new link, please scroll up. You are going to see the link, or Anita, please kindly reshare the link as well. And we believe that you are all educators. When we say that don't spam the WhatsApp platform, it's important we don't spam it. Let's take responsibility for our actions. Please, let's take responsibility. The program managers or community people are not going to be, they are not meant to be locking the WhatsApp community. You are meant to connect with each other. You are meant to discuss professional-wise, not just discussions that has to do with that are irrelevant. Please, let's avoid such. I know there are some communities that when you do something wrong, they will just remove you, and that's the end of the program. But we won't like to bring that here to Teach4SDGs program. We believe that we are all matured people, and we can take to these instructions, as we also have younger people which we are training. So please, let's keep to these rules and regulations. And yeah, someone is asking about the next batch is going to be next year. Please, we ought to have the third batch this year, but with the look of things, the next batch will be next year. However, watch the space and follow us on social media link. And you also follow Dr. Somi on the social media platform. You can go on LinkedIn. His name is Dr. Somi Oluwoshile on social media, and you can also check on all other social media platforms. And it's very important, if you are not following the organization social media platforms, it's very, very important you do that. It's very important. I'm going to drop some of the link right away, while we are also going to be able to get to engage with the organization. So Let me just share this link with us. For those of us that are yet to connect with the organization social media platform, please, it's very, very important you do that. And we'll be sharing this now. For those of us on YouTube, I will also send it to us so that we can get to connect and follow. So that the most important reason for you following is to get up-to-date information about opportunities, about activities of the organization that can be of great benefit to you and also your community. So I've also shared the Instagram handle of the organization with you. Please feel free and click on it and follow that platform. For those of us on YouTube, it's also been shared on the YouTube session. Feel free and share, and also feel free and connect. And also the Twitter link is there. Please feel free and connect and follow on Twitter as well. The Twitter link is already there as well. For those of us on YouTube, feel free and connect. But if we have questions, if we have other queries or which you want us to respond to, we are always available. We are very, very available to respond to it. Please drop a message on WhatsApp. We prefer you drop a message on the main platform, and whereby every other people can also benefit to the question which you are asking. And I believe it's been a wonderful time, and it's been a wonderful learning this learning period this evening. We look forward to have you tomorrow. Please, like I mentioned, for resource for presentation slides, these are already been made available under the learning resources folder. Just click the link, and you are going to have you are going to get all resources. So okay, let me just do something. So we are going to share that link on the general platform, that's the general community, so that you can all get to connect to the organization social media platform. I can see some people asking for YouTube, but also on your emails, for every emails that the organization sends to you, you always see the social media link at the end part of your emails. I want to wish each and every one of us a wonderful and productive weekend. Enjoy the rest of the day.